This isn't as easy as it sounds, because thinking happens at two distinct levels. And those of you who've been doing the course are very familiar with this. There is coarse thought, and that is the thought that is going through the mind that you are all using at this moment. This thinking, analyzing, intellectual, hopefully rational mind that is absorbing information thinks in a certain way. It thinks in terms of concepts, thinks in terms of ideas. It's doing that right at this moment. Some of it is directed thinking, but the majority of it is involuntary. You're experiencing the arising of a huge amount of thought at any moment. And that's what we've been focusing on yesterday and today. The involuntary appearance of thoughts, and I'm going to focus on that a lot just now. But far more important is at any moment we are also experiencing subtle thought. Underlies coarse thought and is more powerful. So what subtle thoughts are you experiencing at this moment? Can any of you recognize subtle thought? Name the categories.
Feelings, feeling tones.
Feeling tones. It's getting there, but not quite. What are the subtle thoughts?
Mood.
Huh?
Your mood. Your underlying mood.
Mood, yeah.
Expectation.
Expectations. Expectation is a subtle thought.
Assumption.
Assumption is a subtle thought. Judgment, yeah, could be. But let's look at assumption and see how an assumption affects your mind, or even an expectation. But assumption is a very, very easy one to identify. Have you ever been in a situation with a person, let's say, where before you met that person, somebody said about them, oh, this person hates you, or this person's got it in for you. Okay, so you then meet them. What is the state of your mind when you meet that person?
Defensive.
You're defensive because you are assuming that at the earliest possible moment they're going to do something bad to you. Now, the chances are you weren't aware of that. The chances are you'll go into that situation and you'll just know it didn't work well. And the chances are as well that you'll blame the other person. But we go through lives trapped in assumptions and then largely driven by expectations. And these are two of the major governing factors of our lives. Assumptions, expectations. They are subtle thoughts. That is, they don't say themselves out loud. They don't present themselves up front. But they're just quietly present, influencing the way we are, molding the way we are. And we don't see them. Therefore, our lives fall into patterns. If I have this expectation-assumption combination, and I'm neurotic, let's suppose my main neurosis is rejection. You see, I was rejected by my grandmother when I was 2, like that. So I've got built into me this belief that I am the reject. And this is very common. I go through the world making a subtle statement about myself. I am the reject. Then along comes some friendly person who tries to make friends with me. So I reluctantly accept their friendship. But all the time, the message my mind is giving that person is, this is temporary because sooner or later you are going to reject me. And I may never say that. In fact, I won't, because I'm so stupid I don't realize it. So I don't say it. But I'm communicating it all the time. All the time while people are interacting with me, there's this kind of, yes, but. All very well, but. Just you wait. Sooner or later, it's going to be like that. So, we create a self-fulfilling prophecy. And our lives then fall into a pattern. We create friendships, or people become friendly with us. We get to a certain point in the friendship, and then somehow it all falls apart. Why? Because I have a rejection neurosis. And the chances are there comes a point where it becomes too painful. I can't wait any longer for you to reject me. So I either reject you or I do something major that forces you to reject me. And I've watched this in people around me a lot. Now this is just a very simple neurosis. It's a very simple, what was the word I was using? Complex. It's a very simple one. Some of our complexes are much more complicated, much more elaborate, and much more difficult to detect. So this is how in life we are trapped. We are trapped by a series of psychological mechanisms like this. And because they are all operating below the surface, at the level of subtle thought, we don't realize they're there. We don't see them working out in ourselves. We don't see our input into our relationships. Being humans, our first resort when things are not working is always to project. That means we attribute the blame for whatever is taking place to other people. We never see ourselves as being the cause of the problem. It's always somebody else's fault. Usually it's this they. They don't understand me, or they don't like me, or they will do this to me sooner or later. Never seeing that actually the action is coming from ourselves. So this is the mind that lacks insight. The mind that doesn't recognize its own activity. The mind that is not free. It's trapped. And it's very interesting if you look around the world. For the last 50 years, the great cry has been freedom. And people focus on political freedom or social freedom or whatever it is. And if you watch those people, I knew quite a lot of them back in where I was born. The most neurotic students were the ones who were most active in some or other freedom activity. And you could see that this external focus was just a symbolic displacement of their own feeling of being trapped, stuck in their own minds. So they put it out there. They joined causes. They became fighters for freedom, whatever it was. But that's not the issue. The issue is their own minds. So, luckily, we aren't engaged in any kind of political revolution, I hope. Instead, we are facing the much more difficult task of transforming our own minds. Because that is where freedom comes about. Mindfulness, compassion is preparation. Insight is the part that really starts changing things. Recognizing what is happening while it's happening. And that requires special training. The training we've been working with is inquiry process. Hifawith, that's this exercise where we find out how we feel about what we're feeling. What's the other one?
Reflection and resting.
Reflection and resting. There are 4 of them.